doing life. It's the experience we all hold dear. It's reflected in our communities. It's reflected in our people. It's the one thing that unites us all, family and friends. Together, we all have something to share.
Welcome to today's episode. We're glad that you're able to join us today. Today we've got a really cool conversation at hand about raising godly boys. Today we have Courtney and Makayla joining us today, who have some experience in that very area. I know that each one of them have really dedicated their lives to their families, but more importantly, you both have dedicated your lives to the Lord, which makes this a unique situation. So I have some thoughts about this because, you know, when we live in the church, we operate in the church, we see a lot of parenting, right? We see a lot of people do a lot of different kinds of parenting. And then we look out in the world, we see a whole nother vantage point of how people parent, right? And there's so many dynamics out there. I would imagine, you know, well, there are probably a few libraries of parenting books out there, some of them good, a lot of them not so good. But I think the thing that's very unique about being able to have this conversation is actually hearing the experiences each and every person has in how they parent somebody, specifically how to raise boys, right? You know, and we live in a very unique time, don't we? Mm-hmm. So here's one of the things that I'd like to do is I'd like to hear a little bit of your point of view to one another, because there's definitely two sides to the coin, right? There's the mother side of the coin, and then there's the father side of the coin, which is why I have you both here today. So I would love to hear if you had to sit each other down and give that best advice that you can on how do we raise a young man to follow God and be a godly man from each point of view, a father and a mother. What would you guys say to each other?
Well, I think it's very important to first realize that a child is designed to have both. So whenever you don't have a father, whenever you don't have a mother, you're automatically going to be missing something. However, there are parents that have done a great job of raising children. So from a father's perspective, if you're a mother and you're missing that father, I think it's important to ensure that there's good role models in this young man's life, a male that he can look up to, and not ones that will steer him in the wrong direction. Maybe there are guys within the church, maybe there's a pastor that has time to spend with him, but he needs that example from somewhere. Now, the mother is going to be able to provide a great example of the other side of what he needs, but he still needs that missing component. What do you think, Makayla?
Well, I think that, there's a list of things that a godly man or boy has. Kindness, love, the same fruits of the Spirit we're all supposed to have. But just in the last few months, dealing with our 15-year-old, the one thing that my husband and I are continuing trying to point him to is the truth. We live in a world today where they don't get the truth anywhere. And so our biggest push here recently is to teach him the truth. The Bible talks about how to be a godly husband, talks about how to be a godly man. And as long as we are focused on what the Bible teaches him, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, and your mind. I think that from a mother or father's perspective, if you hit those three and you're able to point him to the truth, then, the Lord takes care of the rest.
That's awesome. Well, let me just kind of capitalize on that a little bit. How do you keep them rooted in the truth, especially from a mother's point of view, right? Because there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's the fatherly advice, and there's maybe even a little bit of authority that comes from a father. But as a mother, how do you encourage your boys to stay rooted in the truth and not pick up what's going out there in the world?
Just simple things. Of course, we're in church. We live there pretty much. And so he learns the biblical side. But just for example, if he comes home and he's telling me about a girl he likes, I even use that to try to point him to the truth. I'm like, well, what do you like about her? Is she kind to people? What do her friends say about her when she's not around? Trying to just point him, to look at that person from a God's perspective. And he's, thankfully, we have a son who's pretty open with us. If he's struggling, he talks to us about it. So we point him to truth, and by pointing him to truth, sometimes that hurts a little bit. It means you don't get to go do something that somebody else gets to do. But just in the way you do it, in the same way that we want him to treat others, is, the way we try to treat him, I guess.
That's awesome. You mentioned earlier role models. Mm-hmm. Let me just ask you real quick. As a father, you want to be a role model, of course, but you kind of can't fill that gap all the time, can you?
Oh, absolutely not. I think one of my sons is very young, and so everything I do to him, I'm a hero right now. But I understand with the older one, the other side of that, you kind of not the hero as they grow older. Until they get to a certain point in their life, and then they start to realize what you meant to them again. And so, I think it's important to not take that to heart too much, and to understand that, hey, there are other people that can impact your child's life too. And it can't be all about you. It's got to be about the development of that young man and him growing into the best that he can be. And so if there are other people out there, you want to make sure that those influences are positive ones. And I think Makayla spoke well to it. That is, if you raise that child in the right way, they're going to look for more positive influences than negative. And so hopefully that would be the same with my son as well.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So my big takeaways today are: make sure that you're guiding your kids, your sons particularly, to godly role models. Because we can't always be that role model, especially if you're a single mom or a single dad. It gets really complicated. And then from you, Makayla, is really all the love and effort to keep them rooted in the truth, right?
Yeah,
Somehow
for sure.
To cut through the dynamic of what's going on in the world today, so they've got that plumb line of truth to be a godly man as they grow older.
It also teaches them to know the truth later on. They can recognize the voice of truth versus the voice of the enemy. So, you're teaching them discernment later on, I think.
Yeah, and Makayla and I were talking earlier, and we can't also overstate our role as parents or understate it. There's a responsibility that we have, but we have to leave a little bit of it to God too, and understand that He's going to direct them in the way that they're supposed to go.
That is awesome. Well, I just want to thank both of you for taking a few minutes and talk with us on this episode and sharing your hearts and your points of view. I hope each and every one of you have been able to grab hold of something that's been shared here at the table today. We all have different experiences. We all have unique points of view. But the one thing we all have in common is we all have something to share. I want to encourage you to share your experiences with us here at Medi-Share. And you just go to Medi-Share.com and share your experiences with us. We would love to hear from you. God bless you. Take care. We've all been given gifts by God. Do you know what yours are? Here's a practical way to find out what they may be. Don't miss out on your spiritual gifting and how to put them into practice. Download your spiritual gifts worksheet now.